Hey guys, welcome to Conceptual Geometry, Lesson 3.1, Properties of a Parallelogram. So before we get to our note packet, what I want you to do is I want you to take out, I believe it's the green packet that has all the shapes, and we're going to talk about a parallelogram today. So first thing I'm going to do is label some sides. Now I took some measurements on my copy, and I'm just going to write down roughly what each side was. So in this parallelogram, I got approximately 3 inches for these two sides. They're both the same, both approximately 3 inches. This side here, the top I had 5 and the bottom I had 5. So one of the things I want you to notice is the relationship here between the opposite sides of a parallelogram. They are equal. All right, and I also took a protractor and approximated the angles, and the acute angles were both the same at about 60 degrees. And the obtuse angles are both about 120. So again, what I want you to notice here, the opposite angles are equal in both cases. And lastly, from this diagram, what I want you to notice, there's also a relationship between the adjacent angles. Those two add up to be 180 degrees. So now, I'd like you to go to day 1 notes, and we're going to start listing these properties. Now, one of the things you can't get from your measurements, but it's in the name parallelogram, all right, it's probably the most important property, is that opposite sides are parallel. And from here on out, I'm going to use this symbol. We're going to use parallel quite a bit. And the symbol for parallel is 2 vertical parallel lines. It's like a vertical equal sign, if you will. And then also from the other page, our measurements, we know that opposite sides are equal. What we also saw was that opposite angles are equal, and that the adjacent angles are supplementary. And that simply means that they add to 180 degrees. Now there is another property. So I'm going to go back to this shape, and I want you to sketch this into the best of your ability. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's take a look at the diagonals. So I'm hoping that you see that these diagonals are not equal. The diagonal here from D to B is definitely longer than this diagonal from A to C. But an interesting property of these diagonals is that they bisect each other. So this segment and this segment are equal. So if I make up a point here, let's call that E. Segment AE is equal to segment EC. And then likewise, segment DE is congruent to segment EB. Now, again, the diagonals themselves aren't equal, but what they do is they cut each other in half. So they bisect each other. The diagonals bisect each other. So now let's put this into the drawings. So when I say the opposite sides are parallel, here are the symbols for parallel. We use arrows to represent the sides. So this side and that side would be parallel. And then we have side AB. I'll use 2 parallel symbols there because that's going to be parallel to side DC. I also know the opposite angles are equal. So this angle D is congruent to angle B, and angle A is congruent to angle C. I also know that the opposite sides are congruent. So side AD is equal to side BC, equal or congruent, and side AB is equal to side DC, and that the diagonals bisect each other. So that segment is congruent to this one, AE is congruent or equal to EC, and DE equals AB. So that's it. There's only 5 properties that we need to know, and then we're going to apply those to some diagrams and find some missing angles today. So I want you to use the diagram to the right to answer the following questions. In parallelogram x, w, y, z, if measure of angle w is 30 degrees, so let's mark in the figure, find basically all the other angles. So here's what we know. The opposite angles are equal. So w and z are going to be equal. So I know right away that's 30 degrees. I also know that x and y will be equal, and that these two add to 180 degrees. So to find this missing angle, I just have to take 180 minus 30. That's going to be 150. So it really doesn't take much time or effort to find all three angles of a parallelogram if I give you one of them. All right, so angle x is 150. Angle z is 30. And angle y is 150. So that didn't take long at all. Where it gets a little bit more challenging is when we include the diagonals. So now if you notice, it says in parallelogram x, w, y, z, measure of angle y, w, v is 22 degrees. Y, w, v. So that's this angle right here. That's 22 degrees. Again, that's just this one. Then it says angle XWV is 13 degrees. XWV. So that angle right there is 13 degrees. So that's this one. Now I need to find these other angles. WZY is this angle down here. XZV is this angle here. And then WYZ is this whole angle here. Well, one of the first property actually that we learned is that the opposite sides are parallel. So what happens is when you connect those with a transversal, we get alternate interior angles. And we learned about those way back in Unit 1. So these two angles here and here are going to be equal. All right, so I'm going to mark that in the figure. That angle and that angle will be equal. Likewise, the other alternate interior angles will be equal. So this one down here is going to be 22, and this one here is going to be 13. You see how that kind of works? It's important. You kind of think of it as a Z. Here's your Z, so these angles are going to be equal. All right, and then the other one's kind of doing a Z this way. And then these are going to be equal. Well, those two are easy to find, so let's put those in. WZY. WZY is 13 degrees. And XZV is 22 degrees. The harder one is this WYZ. How are we going to get this angle? Well, the way we're going to get that is the same way we got this one up above. It's because I knew what this one was, and I subtracted it from 180 to get that. We're going to do the same thing. We know what this one is here. We just have to add those together. So if I add those together, 13 and 22, that's 35. So that whole angle there is 35 degrees. So to get this one, I'm going to take 180 minus 35. That's going to be 145. That's as far as I want to get today for day 1. We'll conclude day 2 in the next video. But for now, you have more than enough information to complete Delta Math Homework 3.1. Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you soon.